This podcast provides a platform to discuss important questions and complex issues, challenge the status quo, and confront the boundaries of the establishment. I'm retired Police Chief Daniel Hahn. I went from being arrested at 16 to serving over 34 years in law enforcement. My goal is to keep you informed with news not being reported, voices not being heard, and the untold history of how we got here so that we can create a way forward. Welcome to A Way Forward. My special guest today is Tommy Tunson, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time with Mr. Tucson's background because it's quite lengthy and I want you to hear from him. But Tommy has spent 14 years as a police chief, 32 years overall in law enforcement. He's been in the U.S. Army. He's a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. He is also an author, multiple book author. One, COP, The Color of Power, The Odyssey of a Black Cop. And then also created a program that I've never seen before that we'll talk about in a minute. But I want to start out with, Tommy, talk a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up, what it was like growing up, where that was, and what led you to join the military.
Danny, thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you for doing this podcast. What a service you're doing to the nation and to the country. And I really appreciate it. And I've watched it develop and grow. So thank you, first of all. I'm from South Central Los Angeles. For those who don't know about South Central LA, it's where the gangs started. It's where the Crips and the Bloods all originated. In South Central Los Angeles, we lived near the corners of 74th and Central, which is gang central. And I learned to survive at a very early age. Thank goodness my mother moved us and my stepfather. We moved to Orange County around the age of 10. But by the time we moved to Orange County, the foundation of living around poor, we were poor, lived in a very small home, 7 brothers and sisters, so it was very crowded. But by the time we moved to Orange County, to Santa Ana to be exact, we had a foundation laid that we wanted to be successful. I wanted to be successful. Watched the Watts riots, all that came from that. And I said, you know, what can I do to be different? So I joined the Army.
And how'd your family feel about you joining the Army?
The Army, they weren't as upset with me as when I came back and wanted to be a police officer. My mother just did not understand why a young black kid from South Central Los Angeles during the riots would want to be a police officer, the absolute antithesis of American society, of what she had struggled through as a woman from the South.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you're in the military, you're coming home, and you decide you wanted to join law enforcement. What went into that decision? Why did, especially growing up where you grew up, I'm sure you saw some things that didn't reflect law enforcement in a positive light, as you kind of referenced with your mom. What made you want to join law enforcement? There probably wasn't a line of people that looked like you out the door to join law enforcement.
No, there were very few. And watching TV more when I went in the Army, being stationed in Europe, they would always broadcast the riots, the protests in America. Here's this great democracy known as America, this great adventure that really was not reflecting what I have been reading. It didn't reflect the oath I took as an Army officer. So I said, you know what? I'm going to become a police officer. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And maybe I can show society, America, Black folks, that I can become a police officer, be as competent, as professional as anybody else, and change and reform how police are looked at, how peoples of color and communities are looked at by being an example.
And what was your mom's initial response when you first told her, she first found out, however she found out that you were coming home from the military and wanted to join law enforcement. What was her reaction?
She said, "Boy, haven't you served enough? And you need to learn how to do things for yourself in society." But then she says, I kind of get you and understand that you want to make a difference in life. So I'm going to support you, but I don't believe in it because police have always been a symbol of negative distrust among us, among Black people in America. But I'm going to support you because you want to make a change.
And what was your early career like? Like, was it Riverside that you joined first?
I first joined Riverside Sheriff.
Okay.
Then I
I
went
assume you worked in the jail?
I had to work the jail.
Okay.
As the normal progress is you start off in the jail, you work the jail, then you graduate, we used to call it, to patrol from working in jail. The jail is not my best place, wasn't my best assignment because I'm confined as well as the people that I'm taking care of or managing the inmates is confined. The only difference in me and the inmates is I got to go home every day, but I had to come back.
Mm-hmm. And then you moved on to a few other departments throughout your career.
I did what was called lateral transfer because I found out at my first agency that in the late 70s, racial slurs and racial jokes were a big deal. And I couldn't understand why here I wanted to show the positivity in policing, and somebody coming from an inner city environment can be a good police officer. I didn't understand the racial slurs. Here I am trying to learn how to be a police officer in a field training program, how to write police reports, how to, go from call to call, adjust to different types of calls for service. And I had to listen to the N word. I had to listen to racial jokes and comments from my supervisors,
From
from
inside
my
your department.
inside the department, and from my colleagues. And it became a pattern over, I would say, probably 10 years that I worked patrol. I didn't get it at the sheriff's department, but when I lateraled to smaller police departments, I did receive it. And it was different, really difficult to balance being a police officer, being Black, and learning the job because I have always wanted to be the best police officer I could. To me, that meant interacting and engaging the community. This is when I was a young patrol officer. I believed in community engagement.
I want to put some context to this. What years are we talking? What years when this was occurring? Because I know you're a few years older than me, but I know this wasn't the 1800s. So what years are we talking?
Basically from 1977 through 1987.
Yeah. So not too distant past.
No, it's very recent. And then the 90s, when I thought things had changed, they hadn't until I became a chief. Once I became a chief, the focus kind of changed a little bit away from color and more to politics, positioning, people, assignments, interaction, and with government. That changed once I became a chief.
And what in the world would entice you to become a police chief? Not just once, but you've done this. You've been a police chief in 4 different jurisdictions. What in the world would make you want to do that and take on that kind of responsibility, especially that many times?
I thought, again, I believe in changing our country, our society, our democracy for the better. Somebody I believed with my background from the military, from growing up in the inner city, from growing up poor, maybe I can make a difference in the distrust that just permeates our society across America. So to do that, I subjected myself to a lot of inadequacies within the governmental, political, and social system because people didn't know how to take me. And I found out that one of my ways I could get ahead is to get educated. And my mother always told me, remember that your education is going to go like this. You'll have to get more of a higher educational level than you would than anybody else. You're not going to be seen the same. You always got to do better. You always got to have more. And I wanted to be better. I wanted to be more because, again, I could help give back to society and maybe make a difference in society.
And I would say your mom, you did exactly what your mom said, because what I didn't mention in the intro of you, you have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a Juris Doctorate, and a doctorate in business management. So you definitely took your mom's words to heart, I would say.
That's
Uh,
correct. I've always believed that America offers the best education in the world, and so many people, particularly people from communities of color, have not taken advantage of it. Other than the HBCUs, a lot of others, the numbers are really down.
right.
So I wanted to try to motivate, which is why I became a college professor after law enforcement.
So you mentioned growing up in South Central and your mom's kind of feeling about law enforcement that at least in part came from growing up in the South. Between the time you grew up, or even the time your mom grew up, and today's time, uh, what would you say, if anything, has changed, especially in the minority communities or the impoverished communities and the relationship between those communities and law enforcement? What have you seen change, if anything, from the time you were growing up through your career to now?
I've seen a lot of change, and I got to speak very candidly. The change has really occurred. It's gone for the better, but it still has some lingering effects. I kind of talk about the change like turning a battleship. If anybody knows how large a battleship is, it takes a very long time to turn and turn around. Well, I've watched the behaviors turn around in law enforcement with communities of color, and it's gotten better, but we still have a long ways to go. There still are subjective profiling that goes on. There is still that jaundiced eye look. I'm going to tell you that we trust you, but then again, I'm going to look out of the corner and do the wink wink. And I think that that's part of the change. But I'm happy with what I see happening and growing, but it's still not equal yet. You know, our Constitution is a great document, but it's still kind of separate but equal in some areas. And I've watched this, and it kind of just depends. We change code words in policing. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was accepting you. Okay, now in the 21st century is you don't fit our community, and they use the word fit now as that's the new buzzword. When you apply for a chief's job, you apply for a high-level governmental job. If you're a fit, then if you're not a fit, correction, if you're not a fit, then they look at you with a jaundiced eye, you won't get the job. And they don't have to say because of who or what you are, they can just say you're not a fit for our community. And that's the basic changes.
So you wrote a book, COP, The Color of Power, The Odyssey of a Black Cop. What is that book about, and why did you write it?
That book is a journey.
Your
I
journey?
followed I of my life and that of four other African American police officers who were friends of mine in neighboring Southern California cities. And we got together, got to talk one day, and I couldn't believe that the same issues I had in my police department, these other four and four other agencies in three different counties, absolutely, Danny, identical issues.
Hmm.
And I say, how is that possible? And at the time, it was 1990. And I says, how could in the world, and this is right before I went to Desert Storm in the Middle East, I said, how in the world could we have the same issues? How? We never talked about them before, but then we started discussing them. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make some notes. I'm going to talk about the type of racial slurs, the type of actions taken by sergeants and lieutenants against you, having to work that, and you know this, having to work that graveyard shift in the worst part of town to where you know you got calls coming at you every few minutes all shift long, and others get the Beverly Hills treatment and get to work the other side of town. You know how that feels.
Mhm.
So I noticed that. And so I started making notes, writing notes, and then I finally said, you know what? I think society, America, that I love and that I served as a soldier, should hear about one of the greatest institutes in law in the country, law enforcement, how they talk to people that look different than them, whether it's a female, African American, Hispanics, Native Americans, and Asians. Because I met officers of all those groups, those marginalized groups, they all said the same thing.
Hmm.
They all made jokes. I would have people say to me, they would tell me a female sexist joke or a Hispanic racial joke. Can you imagine what kind of jokes they were telling when I wasn't around to others? And that's really what caught me and made me write the book, because I really believe that America should have the truth. We talk about it all the time, but do we really want it? Do we really want to hear it and see it? So I wrote that book to open up some eyes as to real things that happen to real people.
Well, I'm one that, I always think it's interesting that there's some people that talk about issues or things, but don't really do anything to address those issues or things. And I would say I've known you for a while, and you're not somebody that follows that not do anything. And I'm mainly talking about this program that you created, that I've never seen a program like it. I've seen programs that try to bring community and law enforcement together, but this is a multiple day, pretty deep program. So that you call Transformational Policing Model. Um, Talk a little bit about when you started this, what prompted you to put it together, like what went into you putting a lot of work and creating this model that now you teach all over the country. Or I should say facilitate, maybe, not teach, because it's a really interactive kind of thing.
Right. And I would say, depending who you are in the class, facilitate or teach is proper, because there are people that are learning things that have never heard these things before, which was incredible to me. So I started writing my dissertation with my doctorate. And I said, you know what? I'm going to write about policing because that's been my life. That's what I know. Uh, and I've been Black most of that time that I've been writing, being a police officer. So I thought, let me put the two together and
I
see what
assume
we
from the
come
day
up
you were
with.
born.
So I've been around both for a while. And so I said, let me put together something academically. I really believe in education. I believe in socialization. I believe that we can do a better job in policing and engaging community members. And I want community members to understand that we truly were and are in policing caring about the community, especially today in 21st century policing. And after I read the 21st Century Police Report 20, the final report from President Obama, I said, you know what? I'm going to write a textbook. I believe in those 6 pillars that he talked about. I'm going to find a way to put it into training, because police, we need to train as much on interacting with people in the communities we serve as we train in firearms, vehicle pursuits, and those type of calls, crime scene investigations. We deal with people of different ethnicities, cultures, and backgrounds daily, but we don't get more than 20 hours of training in our academies anywhere in the country. So I'm going to supplement the academy training by putting together a course that I'll call transformational, because I believe in changing in America. We've done that. We've gone through a training evolution in America since the Civil War. And I'm going to put this together, and I'm going to call the Transformational Policing Model, which is copywritten in my dissertation, just so people know, bridging the racial divide. And you got to come to the premise and establish, is there a racial divide in America? Yeah. And a lot of people would say no and do, oh, no, we've gotten better. Well, no. So what I do in my classes is I ask people in the classes, do you think there's a racial divide? And overwhelmingly, more than 85% in all the classes that I teach across the country say that yes, there is a racial divide. And I says, fine, I'm going to bring a solution to it if you want to listen.
Tommy, let me interject here before you go on more about the what the class is. Talk about the structure of the class so people know, like who's in this class.
This is probably, as you know, the most important element of this. It is a joint combined community police training class where police officers of all levels and community members from all walks of the community sit in the same classroom, hear the same lectures, discuss the same topics, and interact with one another. I will not teach an all law enforcement class or an all community class because what am I trying to do in my training? I'm trying to bring the community and the police together in a partnership training. Never happened before. And when I first did it in Sacramento Police Department, I just wasn't quite sure how this was going to work out. So it's the combined joint training participation of community members and law enforcement sitting together throughout the training session period, which is usually 16 hours.
So do you experience, or maybe early on, or maybe still every time you teach class, at the start of class, are the officers sitting on one side of the classroom and the community sitting on the other? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Absolutely. That was the first session I did, and I know how cops are. I've been one for 30 years. I know how we are. And so when I walked into the room, I told my friend, I said, now watch this. All the police officers are going to sit on one side of the room. And not only are they going to sit on one side, but you're going to have their cults and classifications
Right,
together.
sitting together.
So
Yeah, yeah.
the SWAT special weapons guys are sitting back like this.
Mm-hmm.
The traffic guys, the motorcycle guys are like the other way, right? Then the community engagement teams, the community release, they're kind of
Mm-hmm.
sitting here like that. So I say, okay, I got this. And then the community members go on the other side of the room, and I'm not sure it was the first or second class. I had a Black Panther in the room, and I didn't know he was a Black Panther. And he didn't tell me he was Black Panther until the second break. Then he told me. But I would have community members like this. They'd look at me and they look across the room at the police officers. And I said, okay, we got to break the ice. So I do basic academic teaching at college. So we took a break. And after the break, or during the break, I came in and moved tables around and the name tags. And I had moved people. So when everybody came back in, I says, go ahead and stand up on the side of the room for just a second. I've moved your seats. And so what I would do is put these SWAT guys next to the Black Panther guys, next to the other community people, and they would all sit next to each other. Hands were folded, but not as here. They came down to about here. Third hour, the community members and the police officers were engaging with each other, interacting, because I also gave table sessions where they would talk about Rodney King, George Floyd, and case studies. And I'd play the video, then I'd have them talk. So here, all of a sudden, this police officer who may have been in the front line of a protest, and this
The night before, maybe.
the night before. And here's the community member that was on that protest line with the little mask on, is now unmasked, sitting in the classroom next to that police officer. And I got to tell you, it was one of the most heartwarming, beneficial experiences in my life to finally see where police and community members are actually talking in a non-law enforcement type of setting where the person's being arrested, contacted by police in a negative manner. It was positive. And the result of this was probably something that I have now come to see happens wherever I do the facilitating or the training or the teaching is police officers say to me at the end, wow, I didn't know community members still despise me, still didn't like me only because I'm a police officer. Nothing I did in my life, but the symbolism of me in this uniform causes people to distrust and dislike me. I didn't know that still exists. And I'm glad I got to hear it come straight from a citizen and not from a lecture or not from anybody else, but from a citizen. The citizens, great story from them is, wow, I did not believe that police officers are doing this many programs. I did not realize that the PD, the cities, they have set up these engagement groups with police officers. They have coffee with the cop. They have all these interactive. I had no idea. I'd never heard of these programs in my community. Okay, this is the 21st century around 2020 discussions that occurred. So this was just, it was an experiment. I wanted to see if it was going to work, and it was resounding.
Well, and this is, as you said, I think you said 16 hours, so typically 2 full days. Um, that's a lot of time for officers and community members to give of their time and busy lives. Why do you think it's so necessary to go that long and over a 2-day period?
The overall, what I also do is I do feedback. At the end of first day, second day, I do feedback and I go around the room and everybody's got to say something. That makes people uncomfortable, but it also provides a case-based analysis of how this is working. And I will tell you, when I do that, everybody has said 16 hours is not enough to cover approximately 163 years of distrust in American history, because I go through a historical analysis where I use a comparison scale to talk about what events have happened to shape and form this distrust that seems to permeate across the country. So, and they all say 16 hours is not enough. It's too short. Command staff, which I commend you for, and you started that. The command staff is just amazed at how much they have forgotten. The line level officers and community members said, this happened in American history. This is part of history, because my training is really a historical analysis of factually based empirical data that I use, not my opinion, to show and illustrate the different aspects. But that's the primary takeaway from that is 16 hours is not long enough.
Well, you talked about bridging the racial divide, and race has always been a sensitive topic, emotional topic, a hot button issue in our country. And the last several years is one of the peaks of those, as we've seen social justice events across our country, protests, cities burning. Some got pretty volatile. So talk a little bit about the emotion that you've seen in your class. I know I saw quite a bit in Sacramento when you did it here. I remember a woman from a neighborhood I've worked most of my career in say she wasn't going to stay. After she introduced herself, she said, I'm leaving. And she's one of the people that ended up staying the whole time, was one of the most probably vocal advocates of the program. So talk a little bit about the emotions you have seen in the courses that you've taught across the country.
I believe it's my approach. When I first stand in front of everybody, I say, I understand that this is a very uncomfortable topic. The fact that we're even talking about it in 2020, 2021 lets us know that we have a long way to go. But this is not a blame game session. This is not pointing the finger at anyone. This is not saying you did this to me because this. That's not what it's about. I am a strong believer in academia, a strong believer in training and proper training for law enforcement and community members together. So I structured this with a two-prong approach, because My belief is that in the two-prong approach, I can cover just about anybody from government to community to law enforcement to different levels of law enforcement to different segments of the community. So my first prong, I call it collaborative community cultural coaching. Its focus is on understanding implicit bias, understanding, not telling you that you are, understanding constitutional and criminal law, because a lot of times you get these protests, people are hurling accusations at law enforcement. They don't know the definition of murder. They don't know the definition of involuntary manslaughter. So my training, I teach constitutional and criminal law. My second prong is community cultural justice education. Talk about the roles and responsibilities of the criminal justice system in America, police, courts, and corrections. It's so important, I believe, in this training to let people know that there's a lot they don't know that they inherently believe they do know. But even law enforcement, as you saw, didn't remember what the Fifth Amendment was, didn't remember what the Sixth Amendment was, didn't remember what the Fourth Amendment was. Yet, and still, law enforcement, that's what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. They didn't understand the First Amendment. Community members didn't understand the amendments either, or the criminal law. So in this training, I made sure from the start, I said, listen, I'm going to go into some very deep, very complex legal information, but it's done so you understand how the system works with policing. And police officers, you can understand the emotions and the feelings of community members and the resentment that they have toward law enforcement, but it's not toward you. It's the symbol of what you wear and how you display it. It has nothing to do with you personally. Nobody's blaming for you. This talk comes up a lot when I talk about the Civil War. People say, why are you talking about the Civil War? I says, well, I'll show you through a timeline of analysis how that timeline is connected to the 21st century from back in the 19th, 20th century.
Well, I'm sure you know who Jim Valvano is in the V Foundation, and his famous speech while his body was filled with cancer, he says, and I'm going to mess up his quote, so this isn't word for word, but he said something along the lines of, you've had a full day if you cry, if you laugh, if you think. And that always reminds me of your classes. Now I've only been in a couple of your classes.
But you were there, and I got to interject this. You were there, and I'm going to tell everybody that you lead from the front. Okay, Chief Daniel Hahn was there day one, and he sat through the training. Okay, chief executives, I know it's a burden, but you lead from the front.
Absolutely. But I saw people, not just one person, but multiple people cry at different points in your class. I watched people hugging police officers that walked in hating police officers, and police officers hugging community that they felt, I guess at best, unconnected to. So I watched people hugging, I watched people laughing, I watched people crying, all in a span of 2 days. So I think that's a great start to bringing community together with law enforcement. And I'm sure the people in those classes will never forget the other folks that were in their class. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions before we end today. There's a lot of, over the last 4 years especially, but it's been throughout time, there are people that think that we should disband law enforcement, that we should defund law enforcement. And there are police officers that think the community shouldn't have an opinion because they didn't go through the academy and they don't understand what it's like to be a police officer. But I'm curious to see what your response would be to community members that say, why should I'm not going to give 2 days of my time, tell the cops to just treat me right. Why should I waste my time in a class when I have practice for my kids, I got work, I have all these things? Just tell the police officers to stop harassing me and stop picking on me and just treat me right. That's all you got to do. You don't need this class.
We have signed up for a social contract. I know we've all heard this before, by not only our birthright, but by our status in history in the world in America. There is a lot of learning, teaching, and understanding that has to go along with that social contract of being an American. And I truly believe that you have to go through this process of learning. You're not born with inherent knowledge and wisdom. You're not a computer. You have to learn it. And I believe truly in this training, you're going to be infused with this. And then I'm not trying to change your mind and influence your thinking, only to provide understanding, awareness, and knowledge to an issue that has been the very seat and foundation of the creation of this great experiment called America.
And I might add, I forgot to throw this in there a little bit ago. There's something that was a really challenging time for our community here in Sacramento was the shooting of a young man named Stephon Clark by two Sacramento police officers. And I might just add to your point right there that his brother, Stevante Clark, was one of the community members in one of your classes, along with one of the police reform activists here in Sacramento, who I've become friends with over the years. But both of them attended one of your classes, which to me is, one, says something about your class, but it also says something, I think, about our community here in Sacramento, that somebody that was involved in so many social justice activities, came to council and was obviously very upset about this tragic thing that happened in his family with the loss of his brother. Yet he attended a 2-day class with other community members and police officers, which was your transformational policing model. So last question,
David,
what do you have?
Can I
Yeah, go
interject
ahead.
real quick?
Yeah.
That was probably one of the most moving moments for me because a lot of the, not a lot, but some of the officers expressed their concern to me
Right.
of him sitting in the class, and then Pastor Sadler expressed, well, this is going to be interesting. I have got to tell you that he made the class to me. He came up to me after the first break and says, wow, I don't know how you did it, but I feel you as you talk to me. And I can tell you that my family is relieved because I'm going to tell them what you have done here and how you have done it and brought everybody together. I didn't think it could be done because I came here, quite frankly, to disrupt the training and call them hypocrites. And he says, after spending this time with you, I have a new quest in life to support and help my brother by the information I received from you and how I saw the police officers and community members together. That meant so much to me. So I just want to caveat what you said.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. And I'm gonna guess that's probably the only time in the country that's ever happened.
So
Be
far,
my guess.
yes. So far, yes. In the
Not just with
entire
your
country.
class, but just in general. Like I can't say I would have done that if I lost my brother like that. Like that's
And I would agree.
yeah, that's pretty amazing. So what would you say to the police officers? Because I know for a fact there are police officers that go to that class and they think it's at best probably a waste of their time when they first get there. Um, why are we doing this? So what would you say to the police officer that goes, first of all these officer involved shootings or uses of force that become, flashpoints in these different cities. First of all, that wasn't me. I wasn't the one involved in that use of force. So why are you taking it out on me? And second of all, if those community members that are involved in those just do what the officer says, we wouldn't have all these problems. So we don't really need this class. We just need the community. When a police officer tells you to do something, do it, and then we'll be good.
Okay, let me take the police officer one first, and then you're going to have to give me a little recollection of the second one.
Okay.
So the first one with law enforcement is pretty simple. I remember becoming a young police officer and hearing about this new concept called community-oriented policing. And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. They're going to try and teach me something again. They want me to learn this. I have enough. I have my patrol car. I have my beat. I know what to do. I don't need anything else. But I found out that the more I listened, the more I did apply to my job as a police officer. So now I hear education. Go to as much police training as you can go. No matter what the training is, go so that you can get a good assignment. You get a good assignment, you're going to promote. So as transformational policing was being developed, a lot of people, a lot of officers felt, hey, this is just not for me. I don't need this, but they do. The same as new weapons and new weapons training has come on board. They'll be the first one in line to try that MP4, the MP5. They'll be the first one to go out into the new oil pan and the skid pan and learn how to do emergency driving. They should want to get in line for this training as well. It will help you understand American history, which in turn will help you understand policing, which in turn will help you become a better police officer. So I think that we've evolved and transitioned in policing. 21st policing is not what it was in the early 20th century with reactionary policing. I would say to officers, this is the new future, whether you like it or not. These are going to be issues that you're going to constantly be faced and challenged with in law enforcement. Community members, this is important for you to understand and be right along with them. We say police community partnership, and I'm a strong believer in partnership. Well, think of your own personal relationships. Can you have a partner and that person is not with you all the time at home or wherever? No. Partnership means together, and you have to be creative and you have to get together and learn about each other. Just like in any other partnerships. I would tell community members this is really invaluable for you because you get to see the true heart of a police officer in a classroom, non-hostile, non-enforcement setting. And it's a blessing to be able to see that. We talk about that. So that's what I would say, Danny, in order for them to understand the difference on both sides.
And have you seen a change in attitude over the 2-day course amongst the officers, which I imagine, some of the officers don't make it a secret of how they feel when they first come to the class. So I'm sure, as somebody that was a police officer for so many years, you can kind of tell those who are, maybe open to this class when they first walk in and those who on the law enforcement side that maybe have their doubts or even stronger. What transformation have you seen that you can talk about amongst law enforcement? So maybe somebody that's considering this course in your history with this program that you created, what transformation have you seen amongst the officers that came in with maybe a negative attitude about the course till the end, and maybe they changed their mindset? Talk a little bit about what
I think that is the pinnacle of what I do. Sacramento, I had them write feedback reports at command level, line level, and community. And I got to tell you, I have two that I can remember, and I believe he was a lieutenant, and he wrote a little short paragraph, and it said it all to me. I wish I'd have had this training when I was a new officer in the police academy, because it has really enlightened me, and it's training that all law enforcement should have. That's one comment. I had another command staff person that says, this was invaluable. I wish we would have more of our department and community members here together to see this and experience this. This is what training should be together with community. But then line level officers would say the same thing. I did not know. I had line level officers, especially from Sacramento PD, that had been around 15 to 16 years and just worked patrol and didn't become sergeants or lieutenants. They would say in their summary, they would say, wow, this opened my eyes. Now I understand why a community feels the way they feel about law enforcement. It's not me personally. It's the symbolism of what I do. Therefore, it's something that can be changed. And I had several comments when I did Tempe, Arizona. Similar comments that I had gotten at Sacramento PD. And it was a blessing. I felt very comfortable, very satisfied that the officers that are receiving this training, I can tell they don't want to be there, but they do say this is invaluable training for law enforcement. All law enforcement should go through this course. It should be in the police academies like shooting, crime scene investigation, traffic emergency driving. This course should be a part of that training.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question, because this whole program, the way forward, is about how do we provide information from people who have relevant experience so people can make decisions to make tomorrow better for all people. So my last question for you, besides how they can get a hold of you to if they want to bring this program to their city, is, and you're a unique person to be able to answer this question, which is why I'm asking you, as somebody that grew up in South Central, came from a family that maybe could have a little more trust in law enforcement, maybe didn't too much care for law enforcement based on their experience, to somebody that went into the military and spent decades in law enforcement and now even to a certain extent teaching in law enforcement and things like that. Do you think tomorrow can be better in regards to a community law enforcement relationship? Do you have hope and belief that we can be in a better place than what we have seen, where there's, riots and cities burning because of this lack of trust between these two groups in our country? Do you believe tomorrow can be better?
The answer is quite simple. Yes, I do. It's going to take a work. It's going to take collaboration. It's going to take partnering. It's going to take a willingness to see a better America. And I got to believe that most Americans want to see a better America, but you got to prove it. You got to prove it by your conduct. You got to prove it by your actions. And I believe TPM training provides a pathway. It's not the end all to be all, but it's a pathway toward future success. It's a pathway to get there. So I truly believe that this is just invaluable because of the message that's being brought, and it's being brought objectively, it's being brought impartially. It's bringing two entities together that we've had issues in this country. We can go all the way back, and those issues that happened from, let's say, Civil War forward still permeate behaviors. And if we can at least make people aware, let them know we're not blaming anybody, we're not pointing the finger. This is done in a support, assisting role. I think, yes, it will get better, and that battleship can turn just a little bit quicker and a little bit faster to show that we really care and we're sincere. This is genuine. This TPM is genuine. It came from my heart to put this together. I did not have to put, Danny, I'll show this real quick. I did not have to put this textbook, workbook together. I didn't have to. I understand, but I care about what happens to my America and my society and my law enforcement community and others. And so I put this together. So yes, I think we can.
So on that note, if a community member, if a community leader, politician, police chief, somebody in law enforcement wants to bring this program to their community to go through this 2-day program and experience what so many other people have already experienced, how would they go about that? How would they contact you? How would they start the process of bringing that to their community?
Transformational policing, one word, transformationalpolicing.com.
So they can go there and try to start scheduling time for it to come to their community.
That's correct. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can contact me off of LinkedIn. And for Chief Hahn, I will send you a PowerPoint that has my full address, my business partner, Chief Lyle Martin, and my assistant, my administrative assistant, Brooke Owens. I will send you all of their emails and contact information so
Perfect.
that you'll have that readily available. And I apologize, I didn't quite have that slide up and ready to go.
Oh, that'll be perfect. So Tommy, one, it's great seeing you. And two, thank you for coming on and sharing your work and what you've done to try to make tomorrow a better day and place for everyone else. That's what we're about here on A Way Forward. So thank you so much for what you have done and what you continue to do, not only for our country, but our individual communities that you touch with this program. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you very much for having me aboard, and I appreciate you. This is A Way Forward.
One of the big purposes of A Way Forward is to hear different voices and different opinions, because that is how we can make informed decisions ourselves. So if you are someone that would like to come on A Way Forward to express your opinion, go to chiefhahn.com/podcast. Chief, HAHN.com/podcast.